Today, I am going to continue my reading of my book, The Myth of Budda. I am starting with Chapter 5, and we'll be reading Chapter 5 and 6. Chapter 5, The Night at the Club. They flew high over land and water until the bird whose back they rode landed on a beach above the breaking waves. Darkness was setting in as it lowered its wings so they could slide down onto the sand. After they were safely off, it flew away, quickly disappearing into the night. Neither of them had seen the ocean before. They stood on the beach, spellbound. The night bordered on cold. A stiff breeze blew in from the sea, and the air tasted of salt, so different than the swamp smells Bob was accustomed to. It's so different seeing it in person, so vast, Violet said. Yes, Bob said, that's a lot of swamp water. Sharks instead of alligators, Violet said. Eventually, they turned to see the land beyond the beach. There was a street crowded with cars and people walking on the sidewalks. A line formed outside of a building there. They made the short walk over the beach and crossed the street to where people were queued. The line was long, and everyone was in festive costumes. Bob and Violet barely felt out of place among them. They reached the back of the line and settled in. Nice costume, someone behind him declared. It looks so realistic. Thank you, Bob answered. Those gills look like you could really swim underwater with them. I could try, Bob said. Soon the club opened, and a muscular bouncer checked IDs as they were allowed inside. He let Bob and Violet pass without questions. It took only the slightest magic. The club was loud, crowded, and elaborately decorated for the holiday. Electronic music soared from the speakers. Overwhelmed by the environment, they settled at the bar to try to get their bearings. He wasn't sure he had succeeded yet when she grabbed his hand and brought him to the dance floor. She grinned and started dancing. She had a natural rhythm, and he liked watching her. He felt self-conscious. Sometimes in the swamp, he danced just for the fun of it, particularly if he came across a patch of fresh mushrooms when the day was especially beautiful or in the light of a full moon. But dancing in the swamp with only the creatures there to watch him was different than dancing in a crowded club packed with costumed strangers. She was dancing close to him now as he tried to let go and feel the beat of the music. She leaned close to his ear. You have the best costume here, she said. You're the best dancer, he said. I'm just dancing, she said. He tried to do the same. Eventually, the club MC announced the costume party. Bob was nominated, and he and the other contestants stood on the dance floor. When the spotlight was shown on him, the club thundered with approval. The other contestants applauded too. He was presented with a first-place ribbon and a trophy. It was fun, but he could have done without the attention. It was only Violet's he wanted. He was surprised to be having so much fun. The dance floor became packed with dancers again, and he lost sight of her. He found her seated at a corner bar, chatting with a bartender. He sat on the stool next to her. What can I get you? The bartender asked. He had a thick mustache, a bald head, and muscled arms under a black tank top. I'll have what she's having, Bob said. In a moment, he placed a drink in front of Bob. He scrunched up his mouth when he took a sip. It was bitter as a spicy bolete mushroom, he thought. It needed a sweetener. I think our drinks need a little magic, he told Violet. He poured magic from his hands into both glasses. He didn't mean to put so much. He was just excited. He drank a generous swallow and discovered that the drink was sweeter. They emptied the cup together, bursting with magic by the time they drank it all. It made them feel too full to be inside, so they left the club and went back on the beach. The night was cold now. The sky was clear and full of stars. The waves crashed rhythmically onto the sand. They felt the magic growing inside of them. They held hands, and Violet noticed something had formed around them. It was hazy clear and elastic when she pressed against it. Bob followed her example. It had encircled him as well. They tried to walk out of it, but it stayed with them wherever they went. "Did you make this?" she said. "It feels like a part of the magic. I may have used too much." Bob loved the swamp, but loved the stars as well, points of light in the darkness. He often gazed at them, but never gave thought to seeing them up close. He didn't know why he believed he was about to be among them. Maybe that was a part of the magic too. Violet's eyes were on the sky as well. She was watching something out there. Bob followed her gaze and saw what she did. The bird that brought them here was returning. It glided towards them in the faint moonlight. It made shrill calls that echoed over the water before it landed in front of them, its sharp talons digging into the sand beneath the breaking surf. It watched them with yellow eyes as they climbed onto its back, Bob in front and Violet behind. It rose into the air, and the ocean soon became tiny beneath them. It rose higher until the air became thin and frigid. They traveled through layers of clouds so that the ocean beneath them became invisible. Their breaths were frosty, but the force field kept them warm. They flew higher until the world was visible below them. The sky was black except for sporadic rays of sunlight streaming down onto the earth like yellow lasers. A blue corona encircled the world, and clouds drifted far below them like miniature balls of cotton. "It's beautiful," Violet whispered. "Yes," Bob said. The bird kept going higher. "I hope this bubble doesn't pop," she said. The space around them turned fiery as the bird rose through the atmosphere and into the space beyond. The bubble didn't pop, and soon they watched the stars flow past them like prismatic raindrops. They lost sense of time and distance. Eventually, a world came into sight. It was egg-shaped and pulsing with pink and orange hues, with Saturn-like rings surrounding it. Numerous circulating moons appeared as they drew closer. The new world soon dominated their view. A giant planet pulsating every color of the rainbow like an infinite lava lamp. It soared over the world at its atmosphere's edge. Without warning, it twisted suddenly to its side, and they tumbled from it. The bird disappeared into the distance as they dropped into the world's atmosphere through cotton candy clouds. Chapter 6. The Queen's Nest. There were things moving through the clouds around them, but they couldn't see them clearly until the clouds cleared momentarily. They saw lobster-like creatures with many hoofed feet, bug eyes of several layers, and spiky antennae protruding from their heads. It passed close enough that they could have reached out and touched it, but it gave them no attention. They were soon obscured by the clouds again, and when they emerged, they found themselves surrounded by a different species. These were waspy animals with 8 legs of fluorescent colors, bulging eyes, and needles for beaks. They were disinterested until their floating bubble bumped one. It startled and seemed to make a silent call with its open mouth. The others came to its defense, swarming from all sides, surrounding them in their bubble. They fired red lasers from their mouth against it. It had survived space and white-hot atmosphere, but now it cracked. The fractures spread until they fell away in thin, jagged pieces. They dropped faster without the bubble, falling past the creatures and soon into the midst of more alien insects. These looked like stinging bugs with spears protruding from their legs. They made calls like high-pitched chainsaws. One sent a web from its mouth that struck Bob in the chest and enveloped his body. He dangled from it as it flew away from him. Violet was also captured and carried away in the same way by another. They flew side by side from the flying bugs like giant wads of mucus hanging from strands. They flew amongst the swarm and soon reached their nest, a tubular, lava-colored cone rolling with whirling bumps, floating unattached in the atmosphere. It was crowded with the creatures. They entered the nest through a narrow entry and were carried up a spiraling, ascending path. As they moved, they noticed spaces to their sides, some empty and some filled with the remains of creatures. Some clung to life, making pitiful suffering sounds as they passed. Their bodies seemed to be dissolving into the space that held them. Violet and Bob wondered if they would soon meet the same fate, but the swarm's felt excitement made them believe they were a special offering. They spiraled ever upward and into a narrow space that widened to a larger one. They entered a large room that resembled an insectoid auditorium. The hive was the audience, and on the stage was a mutated version of their captors, many times its size, a more sluggish version. It must have been the swarm's queen to whom Bob and Violet were a special offering, alien prey. It rested, coiled upon itself, an infinitude of wriggling legs, waving wings under a pair of rotating eyes. Their escorts flew them closer to the creature. It caught them in the grasp of 2 of its many legs and removed them from their cages. It brought them close to its eyes. A pair of razor-tipped pincers emerged from its cheeks and came towards their chests. They moved slowly towards them. Before it impaled them, Bob blasted it with magic from his hands. A multitude of tiny parasitic mushrooms, cordyceps, his mother's voice reminded him, rose suddenly from its body like an army of fungal daggers. They were fast eaters. The creature dropped them as the mushrooms dissolved it. The nest was shaken apart in the violence of its death throes. Bob and Violet were falling through the sky again along with the homeless swarm. A pulsating thing flashed its forked tongue like lightning across the sky, and a hoofed, semi-solid beast with horns breathed fire over the horizon as crab birds flew in formation overhead. They fell in silence for a long time and finally landed in an ocean of pink and purple hues. The water there lay still, undisturbed by waves or wind. They dropped into its depths. The water felt thin against their bodies. Like the sky, the sea teemed with life here. Fish-like creatures, spiny swimming plants, and octopus things with razor teeth floated all around them. but they breathed easily. It must have been the magic. A sharp sound of something slapping the water came from somewhere, and the sea life scattered. From behind them, an animal appeared. It was so large that the width of one eye loomed higher than their bodies. Its girth covered the ocean floor, and when it opened its mouth, they were vacuumed inside, down its throat and into its belly. They floated there as if over a slow-flowing river. Creatures resembling sluggish ducks with wings perched above them along the belly walls. Above them, spear-shaped objects hung from the roof like stalactites. Bat things with eyes on elastic necks perched there too. Unseen animals in the murky water brushed by their legs. None seemed inclined toward aggression, content to float down the giant creature's belly, wherever it led. They were startled when the back of a slithering dragon with scales rose above the water for a moment. Its length twisted for as far as they could see down the Whale Belly River. Further downstream, many of the bat things had collected around a glowing light source hanging from the whale belly ceiling above them. Bob noticed the object hanging there was a large mushroom enclosed in a bright casing. Without consideration, he blasted it with magic from his hands. The casing shattered, and the mushroom dropped into the stream. When it was close enough to reach, he grabbed it. It was as tall as his torso. It had an umbrella-like cap with white speckles attached to it like cubes of sugar. Its stem was the same gray color with a thin ring 3/4 up the top and the remnants of the egg it had burst from on the bottom. It might have been an amanita, but it was an odd spot to find one. The mushroom suddenly began to grow. Its stem and cap expanded, and Bob couldn't release it. He was glued against its stem. It shot back the way they had come, and he yelled out Violet's name as it found an upward path. In the next moment, he and the mushroom were exploding from its spout back into the sky. Violet felt a shock in discovering herself so suddenly alone. It had felt like a magical adventure while he was here, but lonely without him. She floated down the river of the whale thing's belly in total darkness. The stream dropped down suddenly into a cavern and became stagnant. She floated atop the muck for a while, but began to sink as more poured down on her, the weight of it all driving her down. Soon she was pressed against the whale belly's floor, and the muck's weight began to squeeze the life from her. With her face pressed against the ground, she felt something rise to press against her belly. As it rose, she wrapped her body around it. It cracked open and she fell inside. A thick, sticky liquid congealed around her body. It became an armor, protecting her from the pressure above her. With this protection, she pushed herself upward through the muck until she emerged from the cavern. Exhausted, she rested there, wondering what to do next. Suddenly, her armor began to crack, and inside of it, her body began to change. She did not know what she had become until her shell had fallen away and she saw her reflection in the water. She was a giant bird with bright red wings and blue and orange tips. As a bird, she instinctively knew where to go out the creature's spout, as Bob had. She found the path quickly and she flew into it. And as she flew into it, it released a torrent of water at the same time. She shot out of it like a rocket high into the sky, going higher until the ocean was out of sight below many layers of the fluorescent clouds. She flapped her wings and eventually escaped the world's atmosphere and entered space beyond it. She knew her way home. After a long, silent flight, a familiar world appeared. She entered its atmosphere and glided into a familiar meadow of grass and blooming white flowers. In the distance, just beyond a rolling hill, was the steeple of the chapel she had once attended. She had followed a bird away from this place and returned as a bird herself. This completes chapter 5 and 6. I will be releasing chapter 7 and 8 very soon. Thank you for listening.